Care Bears. I'm getting physical. Or, at least I would be getting physical, if the Nintendo Switch 2 launch lineup wasn't chock full of game keycards. Now, let me be completely transparent. I was, and probably still am, a proponent of game keycards. Throughout the past few weeks, pretty much since the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2, game keycards have been a very controversial topic, especially as we go through and we either learn more information or we end up finding ourselves a little bit more in the dark about what the actual game keycards entail. If you aren't familiar with what game keycards are, essentially they are physical cartridges that hold no game data on them. What they do have on cartridge is essentially some kind of code or some kind of green flag that your Nintendo Switch 2 recognizes that allows you to download all the game's data and to play that game as long as you have the cartridge inserted. So, as long as you have that physical cartridge plugged into your Nintendo Switch 2, and as long as you have that game data in your Nintendo Switch 2, you are able to play that game. Ergo, the name Game Keycard. I've been saying Game Keycard a lot. I'm gonna be saying it more. So, what is the current hubbub about game keycards? Well, I am here to hopefully enlighten everybody as much as I can. Obviously, I don't know everything, but I try to at least think about a few more things before I go out here and I post something to all the young, impressionable Jer Cubs that we have out there. Just to get into it, let's take a look at some pros and cons. Cons. It's digital with an extra step. For many folks, it seems like you're just buying a digital game, but this time with a physical representation of said game. Now, this may not be the most foreign idea to many folks, especially those familiar with download code and box games, partially or fully, but either way, it can definitely feel like game keycards are essentially just digital games with the added step of buying the physical counterpart, and having to put the cartridge into the Nintendo Switch 2 whenever you want to play the game. It's digital, with an extra dose of e-waste. As these game keycards actually require the use of a physical cartridge to be used, there's the idea that these items are essentially timed goods. Once Nintendo's download servers go out, these cartridges will no longer allow you to download their game data again, thus leaving you with a cartridge and a case of e-waste. It's digital, so it's not forever. This one's a little shifty because, well, nothing is forever. Discs and cartridges and systems themselves can go kaput one day, but in the case of digital, it's a bit more volatile than that. These game keycards present an interesting situation. Your ability to download the game data is seemingly at the mercy of the actual download server still being functional years down the line, or even worse yet, at the mercy of developers and publishers allowing you to download the game data. Now, are there even pros to the game keycard system? Believe it or not, yes. But before I go into these pros, I do want everybody to keep something in mind. Things change, things evolve, and things become clearer as this generation will go on. Game keycards could very well not even be a factor a few years down the line. It may just be a supply line issue, it may just be something that developers are trying out right now, it may be something Nintendo just completely drops in a few years. But as we go through, talking about the pros and the cons, I just want everybody to remember that things will change. Things are not set in stone right now. The video game industry, I feel, reacts a lot to trends and to, whatever the market tells them, for better or for worse. In this scenario, it may be for worse, but I do believe that there's probably going to be a time in the future where game key cards, or rather physicals that have no actual physical data on them, will continue to be more apparent. Because for a lot of publishers, I think it's just a more cost-effective option, as much as that really does suck for the consumers like you and me. So yeah, just take everything I'm talking about right now with a hefty grain of salt, because things change. Pros. It's a physical digital, so you can sell it, trade it, lend it out. This one, admittedly, may not matter for the majority of collectors for Nintendo Switch 2 games, especially if you've no plans to ever sell your games, but regardless, having the physical cartridge not tied to your account like a digital purchase allows these cartridges to be lent out, sold, or traded with others. Now, I know some folks are going to be talking about how, Nintendo has a system in place for this, where you can just use the virtual game card to lend it out to your friends and family. But realistically, that's just an option for people within your Nintendo family plan. And also, not every game supports the family lending. So it is probably going to be a more appealing option for you to get a game keycard versus something fully digital, especially if that digital version of the game doesn't allow you to do any family sharing. It's a physical digital, so you have something physically tangible. Depending on what kind of gamer you are, and based off of you potentially caring about the whole game keycard situation, you might be the type of gamer who cares about having something physical versus having it solely digital. The game keycard solution is by no means a perfect compromise to the potential issues at hand, but it at least still gives you something physical, and this physicality actually connects to a potential solution that I have for game keycards a little bit later. And then one other thing with having it as a physical, tangible thing, if you are somebody who likes to collect collector's editions, limited editions, or even if you're somebody who's just holding out hope that somebody's gonna be putting in a manual one of these days to a Nintendo Switch 2 game, you at least get that physical item that acts as a vessel for developers or publishers if they want to give you something physically. I do know that there is, I believe, Raidu, which is getting a physical collector's edition for the Nintendo Switch 2, but the actual cartridge is a game keycard. You're still getting all the physical collector's edition stuff, so if you're a big fan of that series or that game, and you still, just very much care about the actual physical goodies that you get, having a game keycard is probably going to be the best compromise you have, versus just getting it fully digital and not getting any kind of physical merch with it. It's a physical digital, so that physical is not tied to only one storefront. Now, this one might be a pretty big deal for some folks. It's also one that I haven't really heard much people talking about, especially when we talk about the game keycards, but having the game keycards be a physical item that takes up actual retail space, at places like Target, Best Buy, GameStop, might work to its advantage, because sometimes physical games are more likely to go on sale versus their digital counterparts, especially if they are things like new games, or if you have some kind of membership program like with Best Buy or with GameStop. And so that's why I say these game keycards in the intersection of physical and digital stand to gain one of the biggest benefits of physical games: the variable pricing stores can have on video games. So there are definitely more pros and cons to these game keycards, but I think those will just pop up as we go through the Nintendo Switch 2 console cycle. And ultimately, only time will tell where we end up, with this type of system, the game keycard system, with the Nintendo Switch 2 and with the gaming industry as a whole. Now, speaking of what only time can tell us, where can these game keycards go in the future? Is this the catalyst that executives at Ubisoft needed in order to push an agenda of limited life and limited ownership physical media? I say maybe. A lot of people recently have been talking up Mario Kart World's $80 price point as the one game that shareholders of the video game industry were craving, as it would finally open up the floodgates and unleash waves of $100 games. But I don't really see it like that. And in the same way, I don't see Mario Kart World's $80 price point being the reason you're quote-unquote priced out of video games. I don't think game keycards are going to be the reason physical dies out. There's already been quite the push for an all-digital future, like with other consoles having digital-only versions, other games on systems basically being game keycards already, and let's be honest, the volatility of video games and their lifespans have been on display for quite a bit. But physical has still remained, and you know what? I think it'll always remain. As someone who shoots film, listens to vinyl, drives a manual, I think there will always be a market for physical video games, partially because there's a market for everything else that is, in many people's eyes, a little bit outdated or a little bit more tedious. I think as long as there are people asking for physical media, there will always be physical media. There's still DVD releases, there's still Blu-ray releases, and it's not even in a scenario where it's like, there's no more cartridges being made, except there's still the technology for cartridges to be made. And if you really are that big of a fan, there are still Game Boy cartridges being made, there's still NES cartridges being made. I think that the video game industry loves to hold on to the things that it really holds dear. So I think as we go on and we see maybe more and more game key cards, there will always be resistance to that, and there will always be counteraction to that. And I think that's the most important part. There is counteraction. Do I think the way out of this is boycotting, game key cards and not buying games, especially ones that you might want? No, I don't think that at all. I think if you were to boycott these video games, especially some of these video games that may be, doing pretty well, I think Hogwarts Legacy on the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to do pretty well, even though it's a game key card. I think Street Fighter 6 is going to do pretty well on Nintendo Switch 2, even though it's a game key card. That kind of boycott might not actually have an impact. I think the best thing to do is to go out and talk to these companies, give them feedback, email them. It's a lot better than just sitting on your hands and sitting on your wallet and saying, oh, you know what, I'm boycotting this, I'm making a difference. When in reality, it's kind of like the Nintendo Switch 2 boycotts. It's not as vocal as you might think it is. As much as everybody flamed, everyone in the Mario Kart Direct saying drop the price, I know that Nintendo probably saw all those comments, and probably going forward in the future, that's something that they're either going to be more aware of, or that's something they're going to be a little bit more prepared for, when it comes to pricing. But, little tangent out of the way. Boycott if you want, but understand that there are more ways to actually, at least talk about what you want to get done versus just sort of being a neutral party. Because honestly, that's what boycotting kind of ends up being. You end up being kind of a neutral party. And just as one final kind of glimmer of hope for the game keycard situation, none of the download servers for the PS3, 360, Wii, Wii U, DSi, or 3DS have been shut down. So in the scenario that maybe 10 to 11 years down the line, you are more nostalgic for the Nintendo Switch 2, and you want to experience some of the games that it has to offer, and maybe the best solution for that is physical game keycards, you should still be able to buy those game keycards and download that game data, provided that those download servers are still functional, of course. Now, it could be the totally opposite situation. Nintendo could very well just shut down the download servers for game keycards the moment the Nintendo Switch 3 is announced. While I was writing the script, I had to think about how Nintendo servers would actually verify that you are able to download the actual game data, 10, 11 years down the line. But then I remembered it's in the name of the physical cartridge, the game key card. So I think for the time being, it's safe to assume that those download servers will serve as a safety net for any kind of physical game collecting that you're trying to do right now, or physical game collecting that you're trying to do in the future. Oh, and just one last thing. Realistically, if you have the proper storage available, downloading these game keycards data onto your microSD express cards and just keeping them on there forever should still give you the physical game experience. I know it's not ideal to have to buy more storage, but in this day and age of video gaming where many big games are already 50 plus gigabytes, it's probably something you're eventually going to have to do anyways. At least having the game keycards data on your microSD express cards will ensure you don't have to rely on the volatility, apparent or otherwise, of Nintendo's download servers. Now, is that the perfect solution? Obviously not. There could be a scenario in the future where 20 years down the line you decide to go back onto the Nintendo Switch 2's library and you buy game keycard games, but unfortunately their download servers are gone. That's a totally probable situation, but so is the world blowing up before then. So I think while we wait for either Nintendo's download servers to go down or the world to blow up, let's all just try to enjoy the games we have now and the heavily compromised ways we have of enjoying them. Thank you for watching the video and listening to me ramble about game keycards. I am cautiously optimistic about the future of physical gaming. I do believe that there will essentially be a point where physical games maybe go through a renaissance of sorts. But it is definitely very hard to stay optimistic as the rest of the industry sort of goes towards this trajectory of having digital be the way forward. And I can promise you one thing, it started way before the Nintendo Switch 2, it started way before game keycards. It's been something that's been in the writing for quite a bit, and realistically, the market will probably tell, developers and publishers that it's the way to go. But I think there's always going to be a group of people who enjoy doing things a little bit more tedious and doing things, the way it used to be done. So, yeah, I am cautiously optimistic. What do you think of the game keycards, eh? Are you going to be only buying true physicals on the Nintendo Switch 2? Are you going to be boycotting game keycards? Are you going to be buying games at all? Things are expensive. Let me know down below. Like and subscribe if you want to see more videos about the Nintendo Switch 2 and all the fun stuff that's been revealed about it or not revealed about it, or misinformed or informed or whatever, man. It's there's less than like 3 weeks till the launch of this system, and it's rough. Just seeing the barrage of news that comes out like every day, and so that's why I'm just trying to, I want to talk about things that I actually have thought about versus just regurgitating everything that I see. but whatever, man, whatever. Oh, and also I should have my Nintendo Switch 2 unboxing video on launch day, because I will be going to the Best Buy midnight launch, which for me is like at 9 p.m. So be on the lookout for that. Got a bunch of games with it too, and the Pro Controller. Probably gonna buy a second pair of Joy-Cons. Why am I telling you this? You're gonna see, okay? You're gonna see what games I got. Whatever. Be seeing you, Jerry Bears. Bye-bye. Hey there, Jerry Bears. This is editor Jeremy. Just with like one last little tangent after I've already like edited the video and everything like that. But just sort of a little bit more of my thoughts on the actual game keycards and what they sort of entail, both as a compromise for Nintendo and as a compromise for publishers, and lastly as a compromise for any retail stores that hold space for Nintendo. Seeing it as sort of a way for Nintendo to still have this physical appearance on store shelves and things like that, I think it sort of shifts that kind of perspective where, why would Nintendo just do these game key cards, or why would publishers do these game key cards if they could just have them as digital download only titles? Well, at that point, you are missing a market of people that maybe don't do digital, or maybe they don't get all their news from online. And, there's still a market for people who go to places like GameStop, Best Buy, Target, and they, walk through these physical game aisles and they look at things that they find interesting and they, pick up and play. So, in that scenario, there is a market for Nintendo to still try and capture, and for their publishing partners, there's still a market for them to try and capture. So that's why I think game key cards are, this kind of imperfect compromise for both Nintendo and their publishing partners, because realistically, if you were wanting to have a presence still in the physical game market without having to pay for, the 64 gigabyte cartridges, obviously we don't know how much they might be or how badly it eats into profits for video games. But as a publisher, if you still wanted to have that kind of physical, appearance on store shelves, I understand why game key cards would be, the way to go, especially if you wanted to take up some of that, retailing and advertising space alongside, the rest of Nintendo's offerings. So yeah, I think it is, at the end of the day, just a very imperfect compromise that we, for the time being, are kind of stuck with. Hopefully things progress to the point where it's a lot easier for publishers to sort of get the smaller physical game cartridges, because a big reason why it stings for a lot of people, I think, is because of the kind of 180 that the game ecosystem the Nintendo Switch 2 is sort of having an effect of right now, where the Nintendo Switch 1, granted, there were still quite a few games that required you to download more data, or at least have more actual like necessary game data downloaded first before you actually were able to, play the games. But in this scenario, I think it is a definite 180 for a lot of folks who loved that physical aspect of the Nintendo Switch 1. I know I did. I collected probably the most physical games I ever had in a long time for a system on the Nintendo Switch 1, and I'm hoping to do the same thing for the Nintendo Switch 2. But yeah, I think for right now, we'll just sort of have to thug it out, and hopefully there are better, solutions in the future. But yeah, again, thank you for listening to this video, and listening to, this portion of the video as well, as I go off on a little more like tangent. And obviously, as this generation goes on, hopefully we see a bit more movement in, towards the things that we really want. But yeah, if that does happen, or if it doesn't end up happening, I will be here with a video explaining, my thoughts on it, and maybe just offering up a little bit more insight to that. But thank you again for watching and for listening to this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and please be on the lookout for any of the future videos that I have. The next video more than likely might just be that Nintendo Switch 2 unboxing. But if I end up recording something before the actual Switch 2 launch, then you'll see that as well. All right. Thank you very much. Editor Jeremy right here. So you won't be seeing me, wave goodbye, but rest assured I am waving goodbye. Be seeing you, Jerry Bears. Bye-bye.